Morphogenics podcast is it's a podcast that interviews or talks with and has discussions with people in the agribusiness as well as the food industries. So our aim is to have discussions and interviews with people doing interesting things in those industries. So I'm very happy to have you as a guest today on the podcast. So in a nutshell, Colin, what is Ingredients 101? What is the aim of the business? What does the business do? Or what is the business?
If people ask me what it is that I do, I tell them I'm a salesperson in the food industry. I don't really know. Because if I start to say, we're sort of experts in certain areas of functional food ingredients, their eyes glaze over and then they want to go away.
I can imagine. Absolutely.
So within the industry itself, I think we all get it completely and we're all passionate about it. Outside of the industry, they just think it's a product on a supermarket shelf and nobody has a clue how it really got there. Other than the fact that I'll turn it round these days and read the ingredients declarations and probably understand a reasonable percentage of what those ingredients are. They probably won't understand why they're there, but they'll understand and recognize what they are.
Okay, excellent. So as a broad definition, you'd say that you're in the food industry, is that correct?
Totally.
Right.
That would be the broadest would be the food industry, because we do have some retail products as well. And the retail products are born from the functional food ingredients. But I would say more so that Ingredients 101 is in the functional food ingredients business. That's what I would say. Predominantly.
Right. Okay. And Colin, who do you say is your client base?
Well, the client base is quite varied because I have different hats. So when I talk about client base, I have consultancy client base, which would be the big plant protein type guys, because I've looked at their formulas and I've helped them with their ingredients and so on. So that would be one area of consultancy. I get hired periodically to locate companies that might be for sale in the food/food ingredients area, and I'll do sales and marketing due diligence for investors. Then I have multiple roles within multiple companies. So for example, Western Foods is a rice and ancient grain flour company. Stable Nutrition is a stabilized rice brand company. G&I Products is glazes and icing, and there are more. Emsland would be another one, which is a starch and a pea protein type company. And I am effectively sales and marketing director for all of those companies, plus others. So I have a business card pack called Sales and Marketing Director. I take over, not in every case, but in the majority of cases, I actually take over their management of the marketing department. I will build their sales collateral for them. I'll write it. I'll build their websites for them. I will write and design that. I will launch that and manage it. All of these companies are very cool. So they have products to sell. And so what I then do is I learn about the products and I take on board business development role for the products. So I sell all of those different types of ingredients, and really the client base that I end up with is rather large companies, the multi-global key accounts, the Kerrys of this world, the Newlyweds of this world, the Griffiths of this world, etc. become my clients because we have so many different products to offer. Plus, I'm very well connected within the organizations to be able to talk to them informatively and intelligently, I hope. And from a sales and a marketing perspective, plus a technology perspective, in order to try and introduce new products to new markets, to new customers. And that's what we do. That's what we do.
Right.
On a I wouldn't say a daily basis, I would say an hourly basis. It's literally every minute of my day is talking to users of functional food ingredients that want to make some form of claim. My last conversation was with the Whole Grains Council.
Okay.
So the claims are whole grain, very simple, ancient grains, all the good for you items, dietary fiber, etc. that comes along. So what I get very involved in is the buzzwords. So when you're looking at the buzzwords such as gluten-free, whole grain, non-GMO, good for you, dietary fiber, the diets, keto diets or some other diets, and there's a million of them, as you know, but those words make up the whole premise of who Ingredients 101 is, and will continue to be today. So I align my vendors, I align the products with the end user, and I spend quality time ensuring that we are a very technical fit to solve a problem for the end.
Excellent. Okay. All right. What would a typical day look like for you?
Really, the majority or a significant portion of my day is to phone people, and I'm still a little old-fashioned, so I like to talk to people, and I then will basically ask how I can help them today. And there is a hidden agenda, and the hidden agenda is that I sell functional food ingredients. And so therefore I know whom to talk to, because I understand their business really quite well. I've been around this business now for a significant amount of years, so I kind of have a pretty good idea on who does what. And then basically I'll try and introduce new products. I'll try and sell more of the same products, or I'll certainly listen to see what they have and how I can help them. So we are a little bit of an advisory company too. The phone rings constantly saying, hey, Garner, I think you might know the answer to this. Well, of course, we don't know all the answers, but it's usually either one phone call, it may be two. It's rarely three to find the answer to a question. We also spend quite a bit of time in terms of developing other people's websites. So linking those websites into social media, things like Facebook and things like LinkedIn, and then using the social media in order to not only monitor but also improve the SEO on behalf of our client base. So if we want to use any of our clients and get them to the top of the list, so that in any form of search, whether it be a Bing or a Fox or a Google search, they will be found. We spend quality time doing that too. So that would be typical, but certainly we are making arrangements, making quotations, supplying technical information, samples, of course, arranging logistics, whether it be international, whether it be rail, whether it be over the road or something by UPS. That is a constant daily task. Okay,
excellent. What would you say are the five biggest challenges that you're facing at the moment?
Well, the challenge is logistics at the moment, because what's happening in ocean-going freight overseas is that if you look at where we were in May, from period 5 to where we are now, we've got a 5 or a 6-fold increase in the costs of a 20-foot or a 40-foot ocean-going container. So that's real. The shortages of those containers is causing untold problems to all manner of organizations. The cost of over-the-road delivery, and actually even getting a truck to pick up and deliver product is a constant challenge. So logistics is one. Two, we're very involved in the agricultural side, which is your area of real interest. And when you look at agriculture, you know, we've got water shortages, we've got fires. Now, no doubt now we'll have mudslides very soon and roads being blocked and so on. So when you're talking about the West Coast and you're talking about agriculture, there is a very severe lack of water in California, which is, you know, what is it, has the fifth largest GDP in the world or something, and from an agricultural perspective, it's absolutely relevant to everything that we do. And so what's happening there is that commodity crops, such as rice, are being reduced in acreage, and they're moving the water to higher value crops such as almonds, just to give you an example. And that is something we have to understand. That's real. So the water shortage in California and the change in the agricultural approach to the way they're growing crops or watering crops is real. So we're seeing a very significant downturn in terms of the acreage of rice being grown in California because of that lack of water. We've had multiple hurricanes go into the Delta. The Delta, a part of the United States, is very significant when it comes to commodity crops such as rice and other grains. So that has an effect, right? It can delay the harvest. It can spoil a harvest. So hopefully that sort of hurricane season, which is over now, as you know, the monsoon season in the western United States is also over. So hopefully God will be pleased with us and not ruin the crops that are ready to be harvested, because we are currently harvesting in California, we're harvesting in the Delta, we've already harvested in rice crops in Florida. And so all of those things have a significant effect. I would say the other piece of the business that's causing difficulty is COVID. It doesn't cause us too many heart attacks. And the reason for that is because our database is so very strong that we have the cell number and the home telephone number of the people we need to talk to. But if you're a company in the business right now and you've got young, let's say, less experienced, I won't say inexperienced, that's unfair, but less experienced organizations compared to the Business 101, trying to get a hold of decision makers is very difficult.
True.
So you have to know who the decision makers are. You have to be able to get a response from those decision makers. And it's a bloody good idea if you've got their cell number so that you can track them down and talk to them. And that way then, decisions can be made in the very old-fashioned way of, this is what needs to happen. Do you say yes or do you say no? What's your answer? You need to tell me now, otherwise it won't happen. So make decisions brave. So that's something that also is important, and it's significantly troubled because of COVID. Advertising, marketing is probably the fifth one that I would talk about. Now, when you're talking about companies in the agricultural business that relied heavily on magazines and advertising through magazines and editorial, those magazines are sent to people's offices. Well, guess what? They're not there because they are still working from home. So when you talk about the printed press and taking out a full-page advert, it might not even leave the mailroom. If it does make it to the person's desk, it's highly likely the person that's named on the label on the front of that magazine will be at home. And therefore, trying to communicate the marketing message to organizations, because that has to go through individuals for it to make it the organization to be dispersed, that's a problem. Because COVID has made people stay at home. And also, because of communication technology such as we're talking on now, Zoom in this example, Teams meetings, you're my 5th Teams meeting today, or video conference meeting today. So the personality piece of that is really struggling, because at the end of the day, when you are face to face over a coffee or a dinner or a luncheon or in an hourly meeting in a facility, you learn, especially if it's one-on-one, you learn so much more about the business, and you learn the secrets of the business that help you to be better at your job.
Did you always want to be in that industry? What made you choose that industry to go into?
Not at all, no. I wanted to be a salesperson, and it just happened to be that the first job that I was accepted, or my application was accepted, happened to be in the food industry. And very quickly I realized that the food industry was a very friendly and informative industry, and an industry that would accept very young, inexperienced people that had a passion to do well. And I've never really said it like that before, but I think that's absolutely true. It was an industry that was fair. It's an industry that allows you to learn and allows you to make your mistakes without any harm coming your way. So in short, I think I've spent every day of my career coming to work with a smile on my face. Now, I've certainly met people that don't put a smile on my face, but that doesn't mean that I felt the need to change my career. And this is what I've been doing for a long time. And that's why my relationships run so deep. And I'm trying to create new relationships as I get older, because I encourage young people to come into this industry. And I've actually done that through the IFT, the Institute of Food Technologists, where we've done pro bono work to talk to 8th grade school children, tell them to pay attention to their math and their science, because some in the food industry, and they wouldn't even think about the functional food industry. But there is an area that this industry needs to be concerned about. I went to a food expo quite recently in California. And I took a gentleman to one side, same sort of age as me, and we looked across the halls, and I said, "What did you notice?" And he said, "Well, I'm not sure what you're looking at." I said, "It's full of a bunch of people our age or older. How many young people do you see in this hall?" Yes, there were a few, but the percentage was very wrong. So there were people working in the industry of 60, 65, 70, even 75 years old, right? And that probably represented, I'm going to say 80% of the people in the hall. The big companies, Unilever, Nestle, Kellogg's, Mondelez, these global companies, they better wake up to the fact that they need to encourage people to go to food technology schools, food science schools, microbiology schools, rather than do something else. Because otherwise their R&D teams will be, one, very old, and two, very short of young blood. There is definitely an area of the business that the global food companies need to pay attention to. And they had better encourage people to join in the same sort of career that I've had.
Okay, Colin, what do you believe the implications would be if the food companies do not address that issue of old or senior people within the industry?
I think that's a clever question, a very good question. I think the immediate implications, and I'm seeing this today, is that there are R&D companies which have been started by culinary chefs, right? there are a bunch of them. There's Matson, there's Chu, and there's others, right? So who else am I thinking of? Doesn't matter, but those are good examples that I just mentioned. Kulinex is the other example that I'm struggling to remember. They are culinary consultants. I think that business will grow. So big companies, global companies, will have to give the R&D to those privately held culinary specialty companies to be the think tank for the next generation. And what I mean, the next generation products is what I mean, not people. You know, what's the next can of baked beans? What's the next sliced bread? What is it? And we all know that plant protein is going crazy at this moment in time, but that's a great example. So a lot of those companies that I referred to, they've been working on these things as external think tanks, as external R&D, and I think that might be an industry that will grow. And that's because they will encourage the best of the best out of the culinary schools, and the Unilevers and the Nestle's and the Mondeleses of this world will be wondering why they don't have any applicants for their open positions.
Absolutely. Okay. All right. And you said that they'll be wondering why they don't have any applicants for their open positions. Is that what you just said just now?
Yes, it was. You know, basically they'll need R&D technologists, junior R&D technologists,
right?
Junior people, sensory evaluation, people leaving college, culinary college, and there'll be fewer and fewer people doing that, and there'll be fewer and fewer people that have the ability and the skills to be really good at it. You know, because if you have 10 students, I don't care where they're from, you're going to have 2 or 3 of those, 20% or 30% of those are going to be the real special people that will rise to the highest echelon in the food industry and become the vice president of technology, you know, the chief technology officers, you know, the #1 in product development, the best flavor developer, etc. You know, because not everybody will be good enough to rise to the highest echelon, because that's not life. And I think these culinary organizations, companies, third-party companies, the think tanks outside of the big companies will continue to do quite well and get involved in very special topics and very special opportunities. And that's what I think will happen. So the R&D teams within the major global companies will shrink to insignificance, and all of the R&D will be placed externally.
Okay. Colin, what do you think people misunderstand about your industry the most?
I would probably say food safety, I think, and certainly still to this day, the functionality of ingredients. You know, a good example would be the old-fashioned, you know, if it's got monosodium glutamate, it's going to kill you. It's really not. It'll taste really good is effectively what it'll do. If you eat half a truckload of MSG, it probably won't do you any good. That's not really how it's used. So I think the misunderstanding of the food industry today is twofold. One, we have educated the consumer to be informed about functional food ingredients, but they're not informed to the level where they're experts. So therefore, if something has a preservative, they might not buy it. But they might buy something that may only have a shelf life for 5 days because it doesn't have a preservative. But guess what? They'll still be eating it in 7 and 8 days. Not a good idea. So just because it has a functional ingredient that is deemed to be bad for you, that's not correct. Everything's designed to suit the demand of the consumer. If they want something fresh, then great, go to Whole Foods and buy a carrot, right? Should it be an organic carrot or a conventional carrot? Well, that's another question. How much do you want to pay? Right? It's all to do with cost. However, the other piece of the puzzle would be, does it really matter if you're going to boil it in a screw? Why the hell does it need to be organic? It doesn't, right? So the education the consumer feels that they have right now, I think, is getting there. And I don't think it's a bad thing, but they're not quite there. Not yet. Okay. Food safety is critical. And, you know, I went into PetSmart just last week, and one of the pet companies had to recall, and they'd done their own recall. It wasn't an FDA recall. Way to go. That's the way it should be. We do not want people dying of salmonella poisoning or any other pathogen poisoning. We need that food safety piece to be A1+. We have to protect the consumer at all cost, and that's not a monetary statement, that is a health statement. So I think that needs to be understood too, so that people get it, you know, and understand that.
Okay, excellent. Colin, what is one piece of advice you'd give to someone starting out into your career?
That's a good question. If somebody were leaving college, and I do mentor students periodically, so let me give you the bit that normally takes place. When students come to me and I'm at an expo, I'm obviously just representing one company at an exhibition, right? They have no idea that I have other things. And what they do, usually what they do is this. They say, I'm at culinary school and I'm really good at, and then they use the machine gun approach and they shoot 1,000 bullets and they want to do this and this and this and this and this and this and this. No. So the advice I give them is decide what you're best at. Decide what you think is the most fun. Do that. Get a job with a very large company, not a small mom and pop, not a startup. Do that 3 to 5 years. Then the world is your oyster. So be trained by the big organizations. And I think that's an advantage to anybody starting in the food industry. If they are really entrepreneurial, then let me back away from what I just said, then go with a startup. If you're truly an entrepreneur, but that's a very special character. It really is. And usually true entrepreneurs don't even know they're true entrepreneurs. So that's a difficult one to quantify. But there is an area of the startup in the food industry, and people have done very well. Think of things like Kind Bar. They never made a darn thing. Just a marketing operation from a very clever brain. You know, there are many other examples like that, where people are not manufacturing anything, don't even touch a product, don't even touch an ingredient, they don't put anything together to make anything. However, they have a brainchild to get somebody else to do it. How smart are they? That's what I think.
That sounds okay. All right. What's been your biggest work or business failure, and what did you learn from that experience?
I think the biggest failure that you get is not recognizing that some personalities won't jive. You know, as a young, energetic salesperson, you bang the door down on anybody that'll open it, right? But sometimes there is a person, the other side of the door, that we just won't ever get on. We will never agree. We will probably never like each other. We will probably dislike each other, is actually more accurate. And the big failure I ever had was really trying to change that. In an example. And I spent probably 18 months not only wasting my time, but wasting the other person's time. When at the end of the day, the personalities will never come to agreement. And therefore, to recognize that in the early stages would be something that would be a great way to behave. Mm. And there are many failures, because don't forget, in the food industry, when you have a project, if you succeed in 2 or 3% of those projects, you're doing all right. So that's 97% failure last time I checked. So there are plenty of failures in terms of product development, project management. That happens, let's say, 97 times out of 100. So that's something that you have to learn to live with, and that's where tenacity rules okay. Because if you want to be in the product development business, project management business, sales business, and you are not a tenacious person, you better change your career really quick.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. And Colin, if you could be remembered for one thing, what would it be?
At the end of the day, I mean, in the industry, I just like to be remembered by my colleagues as somebody that tried to help them. That's it. I'm a frustrated teacher. I always have been. Right, Donna? Oh, I'm a frustrated teacher. I do not mind ever in stopping my day in order to explain something so that people understand why it's a task that should be done, could be done, why they want to do it, and what good it'll bring to the business. And I think that's what I try to bring every day to my job. That's probably who I am. And if somebody remembered me for somebody that would take the time to explain clearly, and I wouldn't say concisely because it's not really me, but in-depthly and purposely, I think I'd be happy with that.
Absolutely. Excellent. Colin.
Perfect. All right. Well, it's a pleasure to meet you. Thank you so much.
Likewise, Colin. Likewise. Have a great day further. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this information useful, please click the like button, and please subscribe to receive new information from the food and agribusiness industry. Thank you. Goodbye.